Picture a room in your home that you never enter. You don't furnish it. You don't clean it. You have no idea what's in it. But you know this much. Your child spends about 10 hours a day in that room with the door bolted shut. That is cyberspace. What's your child doing in there? What's being done to your child in there? Are you okay with these questions going unanswered? I sit in my office, and across from me is this beautiful 15-year-old boy. He's got a Red Sox cap on backwards. His hands cover his face in what looks like absolute shame and despair. I ask my standard opening therapist question, what brings you both here? And as his father starts to speak, I am fixated on the tears that are dripping from this boy's nose and chin. Because boys, young teenage boys, in my 20-plus years as a therapist, these boys rarely cry in my office. But this day was different. As the father started to explain what it was that robbed him of his once athletic and engaged and social son, I realized in that moment that the event that changed this family forever, it was going to change me as well. I've sat with hundreds and hundreds of teens and tweens and parents, but this 50-minute hour, this was unique. And like a lightning bolt to my brain, I saw what I would later recognize as my second life purpose. So, at 17 years old, I had no idea what my life purpose was. When it came time to choose a college, I chose based on where I could ski. Not on a ski team, just recreational skiing. Needless to say, I was on academic probation after my first year. Apparently, skiing 7 days a week wasn't what everybody else was doing. They were all studying in the library, which I didn't know we had on our campus, nor did I know where it was. So at that point, I realized I needed to get serious. I needed to put the skis away, pick up the books, maybe go to a class or two, and I needed to learn, and I did. I finished a bachelor's degree in psychology, went on to get a master's degree in social work, and I'd finally figured out that my life purpose was to help others. So 20 years later, in my office, with that boy and his father, I realized I was failing. I was failing at my own life purpose. So, like any good therapist, I then rushed off to my own therapist's office to admit my defeat. I walk in, I sit down, and she says, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." She said, "Tell me more." I said, "What I'm doing just isn't big enough. Helping teens and parents in the aftermath of crisis, it's not enough." She's just looking at me. I said, "I want to get to the before. I want to get to the place that maybe can prevent some of the unnecessary pain and suffering that I see." At that point, my therapist said something to me, and she said it in a way I'll never forget. She leaned in, and she said, "Andrea, you will never stop human pain. And our job is to walk with people in their pain." So I'm sitting there, I'm looking at her, she's looking at me. I'm a social worker, she's a social worker. I know what she's doing. I know this trick, and I'm not having it. And I also know that the very next thing she's going to do is she's going to tell me how I feel. Next thing she says is, "You seem angry." I said, "You're damn right I'm angry. I don't want to just sit with people in their pain. Some pain I get. Some pain we just sit in it as therapists. And some lessons kids really need to learn the hard way, so that's okay. But I knew in my heart that kids don't have to suffer with such intensity. Specifically, since 2007, I have seen a dramatic increase in both the severity and the frequency of depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, suicidal ideation, social isolation. So I started to ask why. What's happened between 2007 and now? Why is it that the teen suicide rate has doubled since 2007? Why is it that admissions at children's psychiatric hospitals among 5 to 17-year-olds has more than doubled since 2008? What's going on here? Why did a 12-year-old girl jump to her death from a water tower? And why did a 14-year-old girl live stream her own suicide? So, started to look at the research, and I took a walk back in time. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. In 2006, Facebook opened up its users to include 13-year-olds. Twitter also came on the scene in 2006. And in 2010, we could all now take 9 million selfies and post them to a brand new social media app called Instagram. I also learned that in 2015, for the first time in 24 years, the teen suicide rate was higher than the teen homicide rate. Is that because teens actually have to be with one another to kill each other? And the number of kids who actually spend time together, live and in person with their friends, has been cut in half? And if that's the case, is social isolation and loneliness why 1 in 9 teenagers suffer from major depression? So the question became, how am I going to get in front of all that? How am I going to get in front of all that? Or how am I going to get to what I call the before math? So I realized I couldn't. So back to the therapist office I go. I walk in, sit down, she's doing her usual nodding and mm-hmm-ing. And in that moment with my therapist, I figured it out, and I said, it's the parents. It's the parents. I just about startled her off her chair. I said, it's the parents. We have to figure out a way to get the parents into that empty room. But how was I going to get the parents into that empty room? How was I going to get them the key without them crowding out their child and squeezing their developmental task of individuation and identity development? How was I going to do that? So at that point, my therapist did the most taboo thing you can do as a therapist, and you all know this if you've ever been to therapy. She looked at her watch. She didn't try to hide it. Straight up looked at her watch. I'd been in there for 5 minutes. She wasn't buying a word of what I was saying. I could tell. Not a word. Not a word. So, but later, when I was reflecting on my session with her, I realized that I never told her the analogy of the empty room and the key. So I think she thought I was losing my mind, literally losing my mind. Shortly after that, the world gave me exactly what I needed. Isn't it amazing how that happens? The world always gives us exactly what we need. And it gave me what I needed, which is now my second life purpose. I was asked to join a startup called Social Judo as their chief parenting officer. And Social Judo is a parenting tool. It's an app. It allows parents to get in front of the buses that keep crashing into families everywhere. And unlike other parenting tools for your child's smartphone, Social Judo is different in that all it does is send alerts. Just sends an alert to a parent's phone about the things that are of concern. No spying on your child, no scrolling through their devices, just alerts. So, if your child is getting cyberbullied, or if your child Googles something about suicide, or if your 12-year-old boy is looking to satisfy some of his curiosities around sex, and he's using a smartphone to do that, parents will now get an alert. And that creates the parenting moment, and that is the key to the empty room. Now, you've all seen the consequences of the unparented world of cyberspace. cyberbullying cases that lead to teens taking their own lives, sexting scandals that lead to universities rescinding admissions, the stuff we read about every single day. And finally, there's a tool. There's a tool which gives kids the room to make mistakes, but lets parents step in when those mistakes are too big. And I've been asked to be a part of it, which I consider a true honor. So, back to that room in your home. In that room sits that 15-year-old boy, Red Sox cap on backwards. He fell in love for the first time with a sweet 16-year-old girl who lived across the country. They met on social media and had an intense year-long relationship. They never met in person, but countless hours of chatting, getting to know each other, supporting one another. It was what this boy thought was true love. So after a series of red flags, his parents started to get concerned. He was becoming more withdrawn, isolating from his friends, his grades were dropping. So finally, his parents decided to enter the room. And what they found was that his sweet 16-year-old girlfriend was actually a 48-year-old pedophile living in upstate New York. So, in front of me, the bus has crashed into this now suicidal boy. The father has a plan to find and kill the perpetrator. I'm trying to pick up the shattered pieces, and I'm sitting right in the middle of the aftermath again. That room is cyberspace, and that room is right here. 4.5 inches by about 2.5 inches. And that room sits in the palm of your child's hand, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you need the key. Because your kids need you to step on the brakes for them until they're developmentally ready to handle many of the situations that they encounter right here. So, remember when you were a kid, rolling around in the back of your parents' car, windows are probably closed and someone was smoking, nobody was wearing a seatbelt? Remember? I can just picture my mother in the BMW with the Merit ultralights and the dying back there. Remember when we were kids riding our bikes all over town? Nobody wore helmets, right? Yet today, seatbelts and helmets are expected. And those who don't use them are considered uneducated or reckless. But back then, our parents just didn't know any better. They didn't know that what they were doing was harmful to their kids. And then the research and the statistics proved them wrong. So, it's okay to learn some things the hard way, right? Like beer before liquor, never sicker. I learned that one in college, I think, too. It's okay to learn the hard way that skiing your way through college probably isn't going to work. I had to experience that one to learn it. And maybe it's okay to learn the hard way that a career spent in treating but not preventing catastrophic life events isn't your true calling. I had to experience that one too before I learned it. But using seatbelts, wearing helmets, and protecting your child from those who may harm them through their smartphone, these aren't lessons we can allow anyone to learn the hard way. And the way I see it, it's on all of us not to just kind of ski through this one. It's on all of us to take the simple steps, to use the very accessible means to be smarter, to be present, and to parent our kids in the space they occupy most. Because like helmets and seatbelts, the time is here. Thank you.